to interpret this and pause it at certain times and summarize what's going on in the movie. Or not. I guess that's not going to work. So I guess I'm not doing that. I guess I will interpret something else that I have done. Let's do this one.
A little bit.
Okay, so we're going to talk about today discrimination and the civil rights movement. So, how we need to continue this struggle and this oppression, and how we need to continue to fight this. So, you see the name on the board, there's two different names. The second one is Rosa Parks, and the first one is Emmett Till, and Rosa Parks, of course, is the second one. So, what do you guys know about these two different people? I'm sure you guys know some stories about both of them. Emmett Till, of course, he traveled to Mississippi with his wife, and his friends kind of looked at them and were like, no, you can't do that in this state. A white woman having a conversation and discussing different topics with a black man, that just didn't go together. You couldn't have a white woman and a black man standing there talking together. So this black man, Emmett Till, walked up to a white woman and was trying to have a discussion with her, but the race is different and that wasn't accepted at the time. So and he ended up killing the black man. There was an uproar around the country about, how this is not okay. But the white man was never punished, the white husband. So people had a lot of negative feelings about this and wanted to discuss this further. So I'm confused. A white man, he killed a black man? But why didn't he have any punishment? That doesn't seem okay. Yeah, I mean it happened and it tended to happen during this time. It was a continual problem. During this time, the jury was all white. So if they had a case that was a white person against a black person, they almost always to side with the white person. It's a very similar to what you were just saying. People were very angry in the country, of course, all around America and the South. It was a normal event. I mean, it happened all the time. Versus in the North, a lot of people were very angry at this happening. They felt that this man needed to be punished. He did something that was bad. It was not acceptable, but in the South it was okay. All right, so now let's talk about the second person, Rosa Parks. Who do you think that is? I think she was a part of the NAACP. Yes, yes, she was a part of the NAACP. So before she was taken into custody, the reason why she was taken into custody was because she decided that she was going to sit at the front of the bus and not move. The NAACP was trying to find a reason to fight this oppression and to facilitate some sort of retaliation. But they wanted the laws to change, but it just wasn't. So again, Rosa Parks, she was sitting in the front of the bus and she just refused to get up. She didn't want to give her seat to a white person. She had been sitting there during that time, and of course this happened in Montgomery, Alabama, and it started the Montgomery boycott. It was very famous, and it happened for a whole year where black men and women refused to take the bus. They were not going to join in and take the bus as they were before. They were a huge part of that, the bus system. So black men and women were, of course, putting so much money into this system, and they had to find other ways of getting around. So there was a church bus system. You know, taxis were so expensive; it was very hard. Sometimes they had to walk on foot. They had to go a long ways to go where they worked. The bus system was a white business. So they just decided that this was something that they were not going to participate in. So Rosa Parks, she was arrested. And what happened? How did the boycott end? So first off, the bus company, they decided that the black and white citizens in Montgomery would be allowed to sit wherever. And that was, of course, after a whole year of the Montgomery. The government, the jury system, the Supreme Court decided that this was not okay. So there was another problem was the interstate um, movement to where a person could go from different states and travel from different states, and that was one way in which people could evade the law as far as um, race happened. So they would argue that the bus was made in a different state, and so we don't have to be a part of these specific laws. Maybe parts of the bus, the different machinery in the bus, when it was arrived into a different state, they could argue that the laws are different depending on state, so we're not going to follow that. This was made in a different state. This was, of course, in 1959. Yes, you're right. It was the first black and white school system in which they made it legal to where black and white students had to come together and be mainstream together. Remember, there were only 9 black students going into a white school system, not 909. So of course they were again the minority going into this. So President Truman, did he try to help this? Well, the government refused, honestly. The government refused to mainstream in 1958. And what they did instead was they decided to close down many different schools so that this wouldn't happen. And then there was President Eisenhower, where he decided that we must force students to be mainstream together. And he decided that the laws must be carried out and helped to make sure that they really go through. So of course he was the leader of the world of America. He was the president. So it was his responsibility to accept this change and to follow the laws. So again, we're talking about the civil rights movement. And there were two very different groups of people. There were people who were very angry at it and who wanted violence, and then there was the group who did not want violence. These were two different groups in the civil rights movement. We heard of him before. Maybe even another person named James Lawson. Do you guys know James Lawson, his background? I think he worked at a church, didn't he? He was maybe a religious leader? I don't know. Yeah, he was a preacher. Yeah, just like Martin Luther King. He was a missionary, etc. So he went to India, is actually where that man studied the ways in India. He wanted to learn about the non-violence, and he learned it from Gandhi. He was fascinated and continued to learn about this subject. So Gandhi lived in South Africa. He was continuing to fight for these rights. So he then moved from South Africa to India and he continued to struggle. He wanted independence for India. As of that time, the British controlled India. So he wanted to help them get away from this situation.